Hello, my name is Bridget Miller, and today I'm going to be going over functional communication training as part of my final project. I chose functional communication training because it's the bread and butter of my classroom as far as teaching communication to replace behaviors. That's not like a new concept. We've known for a very long time that behavior is a way of communicating. Even Plato and Rousseau also came up with that same idea that behavior is a way to communicate. Think, for instance, if you have a student that is pointing at something, they may want that. It indicates that there's something there that they want. A student going like this, that's indicating that they're mad at you. They're telling you, I'm mad at you. So behavior has a way of communicating, but it's not always appropriate, and that's where functional communication training comes in. It is a fairly simple concept that they've made into a formal strategy with steps, and that is just to guarantee against error and that the student actually learns an appropriate behavior in a systematic way, and it's becoming scientific, so it can be research-based, it's evidence-based, and we can use it in the classroom effectively. I love functional communication training. It's easy to use. It can be used across the board for many behaviors, and it is evidence-based and used and shown to be effective for all ages of children. We use it with my child at home, especially when he's becoming upset and he wants milk. Sometimes he'll open up the fridge and he'll go, ah! So that's a behavior that I would want to replace with appropriate communication. They still have access to the stimulus that they want, so he still gets milk, but it's with an appropriate communication. Instead of going, ah, and screaming and going over to the fridge, he can use appropriate communication. The reinforcement stays the same, but the behavior changes. And with functional communication, it just turns into a way to use more appropriate communication skills. The definition that I found that was, it's FCT can sound a little bit complicated whenever you read the journal definitions, but it's really not very complicated. This one says FCT is a function-based differential reinforcement procedure that involves teaching the individual to use an appropriate communication response to access the reinforcer responsible for maintaining problem behavior. All that to say is, instead of a problem behavior, we're going to use a systematic way to teach appropriate communication to replace a problematic behavior. That's all it is. Research, FCT has been around for about 33 years. It's in response to the swing away from negative reinforcement and punishment and towards PBIS, so positive supports. It's been around forever, but it hasn't always had enough research based into it or enough of the right kind of research, but now it is very much a research-based intervention, and it meets all of the rigorous guidelines for being a very well-known and rigorously tested strategy for communication and problem behavior. FCT is good for a teacher. It's very user-friendly. It can be used with a variety of behaviors, and those behaviors can be very severe, which is very important to me. It can be used for biting. It can be used for headbanging, any kind of self-destructive behavior, elopement. It can be used when a student gets upset when their ritual has been broken. It's just good for a variety of different behaviors as long as they're trying to access some kind of social consequence. So as long as, that's what makes it a really good program to use or a really good strategy to use. This was funny. I saw this in every single one of the journal articles that I read, so I felt that it was worthy to definitely be spoken about in this video. FCT is the most widely prescribed intervention when functional analysis shows a behavior is reinforced by more than one social consequence. So that means that if a student is trying to access attention, or maybe they're also trying to escape an activity, or if they are it's used to, if you have multiple social consequences that they are trying to access at once, FCT can be used effectively with those behaviors. Treatment with FCT or functional communication training is often paired with extinction. So you are building up appropriate communication while ignoring the problem behavior. That's not always possible. Sometimes behavior is destructive. It can be used with schedule thinning. It can be used with punishment in the case of destruction of property. It can also be used with schedule thinning, extinction, punishment, and, well, basically differential reinforcement. Oh, another pro to this is if you have a student that is used to communicating via sign language, PECS, or verbal. It doesn't matter. It's still research-based with all different types of topographies of communication. So it's still effective, and it just depends on the students. There's some flexibility there. So if you want a student to hand you a PEC sign that I want a break please whenever they're working, and instead of eloping and you're trying to replace it with I want a break, they can hand you a sign, they can request a sign, or they can sign physically. It doesn't matter. It's still going to be effective. The steps for implementation are not seriously difficult, but they are important that they are followed. The very first step is to perform a functional behavior analysis, and that is important because you want to make sure that the student, what they're trying to access, and the replacement behavior is appropriate. If a student is trying to, you want to make sure that you do the FBA. Without the FBA, you really can't do functional communication training if you don't know what they're truly trying to access. If you don't know what they want, then you can't use functional communication, because remember, it's the stimulus that is the reinforcement for using appropriate communication. Step 2 is just what kind of communication are you going to expect them to use? If it's a fairly, if the student is fairly verbal, it might be a complete sentence. It might be a way to get the teacher's attention. Hey, Mrs. Miller, can I go to the bathroom? It might be as simple as handing a picture that says break. It could be a sign, something. And that's what it's very individualistic. It's whatever meets the child's needs. Or adults. It's effective with adults as well. And then you choose your shaping procedure. In my videos, I did prompt reduction. So you may also sabotage to create opportunities for the behavior to occur. The unique thing about FCT is that it is begun by the child, so they are the one that starts the treatment action. So it can be very difficult. Without sabotaging an environment to really give enough practice with this. So you may need to sabotage the environment to create the problem behavior so that you can use it, so that you can replace it with appropriate communication. So step 4 is the application of differential reinforcement for communication and extinction for problem behavior. So you're going to reinforce appropriate communication and ignore problem behavior. FCT is used throughout the day, and the student initiates the treatment. We said that it's very important that this is used throughout the entire day. It is not meant to just be, we're only going to work on this here. We're going to work on it throughout the day. It doesn't matter where we are going to work on it. It needs to be followed through with fidelity. Step 5, the addition of other treatment components when necessary. FCT is commonly used with extinction, but it can also be paired, as I said before, with punishment in rare instances, and that would be for destruction of property, etc. Step 6 is probably one of the most important to making sure that we really get to the whole holistic view of the child with autism or person with intellectual disability. Is generalizing to different therapists, different teachers, different people, different environments. We really want to make sure that this skill can be used across the day. If we break a ritual with a student and we're trying to do, that ritual may occur throughout the school day. It might be performed at home. It doesn't matter. We want to make sure that the replacement behavior will occur in that environment. So it's important that the skill is generalized, because the behavior is probably generalized. Hello, this is the portion about data collection. With FCT, the very first thing that you want to do is you want to do a functional behavioral assessment. Without an FBA, you cannot do FCT. It's a very important part, an important piece of FCT, primarily because if you don't know the function of a behavior, then you don't know how to replace it appropriately. And also sometimes, just because a student is asking for fruit snacks, it might not be that they want the fruit snacks. Sometimes they just might want your attention. So you have to make sure that you really understand what type of behavior you're wanting to replace. So, and what kind of communicative response you want the student to have. So instead of I want fruit snacks, it might be I want you. So it's really important to do a really high quality functional behavior assessment. And then when you when you start your FBA, you're going to do some ABC data. So you're finding out what happens prior, the behavior, and then what happens after. So the consequence, you're going to take the date, the time, the location. All of that is very important. You want to collect your baseline data, and that's just to show that when you do finally analyze the data, make sure that you've chosen the correct functional response, and the behavior. You want to track the type of prompts. Once you started implementing FCT, you want to track your prompts as well. So we want to make sure that the problematic behavior is going down and the appropriate behavior that we're trying to replace with is going up. And we also want to track prompts, so prompting should go down. So we want to make sure that we gradually fade prompts. Also, anecdotal notes are also, important, just in case you're like, oh, I didn't miss, what really happened before, maybe because I was on the phone, etc. And really making sure that your consequences that you, as an implementer, say you have fidelity. So that's important as well. So as far as tracking behavior, you need your location, the antecedent, the interfering behavior or the replacement behavior, whichever occurred, the type of prompts required, the consequences that were presented, and then any anecdotal notes. If you choose to track the behavior, that's fine. You can do a frequency behavior comparing the interfering behavior with the replacement behavior, and then always making sure that you're tracking your location, because you want to be able to generalize the area, and making sure that over time you can generalize the skill not just to different locations, but to different people. And that's important in a classroom, because if there's a sub or if there's someone else that has to work with the student can use appropriate behavior with that. And the shaping that we would want to do with the behavior, it might be important to do anecdotal notes, because at first, if they're trying to form a sentence, if you have a verbal student, they might say snack at first, and then you might want to shape that response to say, I want snack. So that's important to keep track of as well, so how you're shaping the behavior. It seems like a lot to take track of, but it's a simple ABC data, a table, and it should be fine. So, thank you. Hi, this would be step 1, and I just want to show what the behavior would look like prior to the functional communication training. And so I'm going to be using my very problematic student, Denise, and she's not a fan of math today or any other day. Okay, Denise, let's do 42 minus 2. How many doors are we going to move over? Oh, no, stop. So after completing a functional behavior assessment, it was very clear that Denise did not like math, and when required or asked to do work, she then decided to escape. So she did that by running towards the door. This happens only during math, and it's only about it happens fairly quickly. So we know that she is trying to avoid math and completing math tasks. So after you complete your functional behavior analysis, then you know the function of the behavior, and you can choose an appropriate communicative response. For Denise, she gets pretty mad. She even threw my math mat on the floor. So we are going to be using a break card, a simple break request, and then I'll be showing you how I'm going to reduce prompts and then shape the behavior so that she starts initiating it, and instead of me physically putting the card in her hand and saying, you can have break, and then setting a timer. One of the pitfalls that I would want to avoid with this is after Denise thoroughly understands how to use a break card, I would want her to not request it all the time, but I want to keep in mind that she's not working in math right now, so requesting a break is way more appropriate than just running away from me while I'm teaching math. So if I can keep that in mind and not be so sad about all the learning opportunities that she's losing. But after a while, I will increase the amount of time she has to wait before her request is given. So I might say, you can have break after you finish this problem. And then later on, it might be, you can have break after you finish these 3 problems. Yes, you can have break after you finish these 4 problems, and so on. And we can also reduce the amount of time that we give for break at and after she's gotten used to doing this for a very long time and is very proficient with using a break card and is no longer using the behavior that we want to exceed. So hello, this is the beginning of step 2, where we are using our communicative response, our appropriate behavior, to shape the behavior. So we are going to do math. We know we're going to set up the environment for math, because we know that's what she's trying to escape, and we want to create an environment that would create the problematic behavior so that we can replace it with the appropriate one. So instead, when she goes to run, I'm going to try to stop her and then physically guide her to the break card, and then allow her to take a break, and then set a timer, and then I'll remove the math. So here we go. Okay, Denise, let's look. Let's do 35 minus 10. What are we going to do? Oh, break. Thanks, Denise. You can have break. Break. 5 minutes. Break. Good job. Hello, this is step 3, shaping the behavior. In my last video, we initiated and we chose the communicative response, and this time we're going to start shaping the communicative response to be what I want it to be. And she's going to have 3 cards, and I want her to actually pick up the card and hand it to me. Instead of physically guiding and verbally guiding her, I'm going to use a gestural prompt this time, so I'm going to do prompt fading. And also, it's good to keep in mind that in the real world, we would do several trials with probably physically guiding and work gradually into this. Also keeping in mind that we are going to continue with our data and keep tracking of the problematic behavior, and also tracking the functional communication that we want her to use, and what happens before, during, and after, so continuing our ABC data, and also, just tracking the behavior to make sure that we're actually replacing the behavior and that our communicative response is working to replace the problematic behavior. So, here we go. Hey Denise, let's do some math. 37 minus break. Good job, Denise. Break. 5 minutes. Break. Hi, we're going to continue on with step 3, which is shaping. Now Denise has gone through, we've done physical prompting, we've done gestural prompting, and then now she is ready. We're going to try to fade the prompts and see that she's independent. If she's independent and is able to do that fairly well by herself for a period of time, then we can start generalizing the task, which would be step 4. So just hold on and see how Denise does. Hi Denise, you ready for math? Let's do 28 plus 10. Thank you. You may have a break. 5 minutes. Break. Hello, we are continuing on with our generalization step for FCT. We have laid down a cloth and we're going to pretend that we have changed our classroom environment. I'm also now a different person. So we're going to pretend I'm a different person, because if you're going to generalize the skill, you're not going to just generalize it across settings, you're going to also generalize it to different people. So if for some reason there's a sub, we would want the person to use appropriate communication with the sub, not just the same teacher that she works with all the time. So, and also if for some reason we needed to do math in a different area, they could still use the same appropriate communication. So here we are. Okay, Denise, can you show me 4? Show me 4. Break. Okay, break. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Hey, I wanted to go over some possible pitfalls with FCT before we finished out this video and this lesson. Possible pitfalls would be a student maybe overusing their reward choice, or not their reward choice, their communicative response. So if you're doing a lesson, they might be overusing their break card, and they may never have any learning opportunities because they've overused their break card. Some things to keep in mind is that if a student is the purpose and the focus of the behavior the focus of FCT should be the behavior, and they weren't getting any learning opportunities in the first place for doing because they were escaping or whatever, something was causing them to escape their learning opportunity anyway. So it's not like they're really missing out on that many learning opportunities that they had before. So it's good to keep in mind that your focus should be on the behavior. But after a while, you can start implementing, maybe instead of an unlimited amount of break cards, you give 3 break cards or 4, and you gradually decrease the amount of breaks that they're allowed to request. You could also increase the amount of time between the request and the compliance with that request. You could also decrease the amount of time that breaks occur. So if you go from 5, you might gradually fade down to 4, and then to 3, and then 2, to where they're taking shorter breaks. Another pitfall is if the stimulus is not available, so they're not able to do that. So if a student is ritualistically shutting on enough lights, then if they're not able to do that, given a different environment, say if you're teaching a lesson, shutting on and off the lights might be disturbing. So making sure that you have maybe a sign or a visual saying that request is not available right now. Keeping in mind that when you first start FCT, every request really needs to be honored so that they learn it. But if you avoid these pitfalls by doing the suggested things, you should be okay. But it's important to understand the pitfalls for any intervention and how to avoid them. So it's important. Thank you.